6:04 p.m. And I'm going to ask Ms. Bishop to read the roll.
Ms. Bishop is here. Ms. Giglio?
Here.
Ms. Raymond is not here tonight. Ms. Oden?
Here.
Ms. Brown?
Here.
Ms. Johnson?
Present.
Mr. Guarino?
Here.
Ms. Seem?
Here.
Ms. Timmons?
Here.
And also in attendance, we have Ms. Bernardo, Ms. Gingras, Mr. Donovan, Dr. Andrade, Mr. Parker, and Dr. McKinney. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Bishop. We have 2 items on our agenda. We have curriculum and athletics. So we have curriculum first on the agenda. So I'm going to turn it over to administration. I'm not sure who's going to field this, but maybe Dr. McKinney can tell us.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Guarino. Dr. Andrade and Mr. Parker will both be presenting.
Okay,
Thank
great. You have the floor, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank Dr. McKinney, the chair, as well as the full school board for this evening for our presentation tonight. Mr. Parker and I will be splitting the curriculum budget presentation throughout the evening. So if we can pull up tonight's PowerPoint slide, I would be greatly appreciated. Excellent. So just the overview of our presentation tonight when we talk about the curriculum budget. Again, this is a full presentation. It addresses the whole student population from age 3 through 18 and from preschool to grade 12. We're on slide 2. If we can just advance it, Gabby, thanks. Again, it involves over 1,000 teachers, 400 paraprofessionals, every administrator. And when we talk about the budget, it supports all curriculum, instruction, assessment, and our professional development. Next slide, please. And when we really talk about the budget rationale, in every conversation that we have, in every conversation, in every meeting, every faculty meeting, when we meet with our building principals, we have 4 guiding questions. What do we want all students to know and be able to do? How will we assess the students' knowledge and skills? What will we do if the students do not meet proficiency? And what will we do if the students exceed proficiency? So using those 4 guiding questions, we really look at developing our budget as we move forward. Next slide. And again here, using those 4 essential questions, we want to make sure our curriculum is aligned with research around a growth mindset, that continuous improvement process. We want to ensure that this high quality instruction for all students along with a multi-tiered system of support. And we want to continually assess both the learning rate and the growth of all students to provide high quality professional development for all of our educators. And this budget rationale is directly aligned with the Nashua strategic plan. Next slide, please. Mr. Parker.
And so,
can you, before you begin, Mr. Parker, is it possible? Yeah, you did it. Can you put it in full screen? Looks like you've done it. Did you hear what I said? Can you hear me?
Ms. Bernardo is trying, but
oh, okay.
For some reason, when I do full screen, it loses all the audio.
Oh, okay.
So I'm sorry.
All right, well, just put it back the way it was. I'm sorry.
okay.
Okay.
So Mari and I have spent particularly the last few months asking all our principals and curriculum leaders, curriculum liaisons, our steering committees, what do kids, coming out of this pandemic, what do kids need to know and be able to do? And what do we need to do differently, perhaps, from now until the end of the year and summer planning? And so here, I'm not going to read everything to you. It's there on the screen, but you know, teachers have been really mindful of making sure that now that kids are back in hybrid, remote and in hybrid, and as we prepare for the fall, you know, making sure that they're in the best position to make sure kids are learning, and what supports do we need now? Do we need to emphasize, or do we need to do some additional work? And so as you can see in elementary, Kate, they're moving their work forward to be prepared. With the middle, you know, study sync another year, and then it's the last year of the contract, and then perhaps we'll be looking at, do we need another platform, another way to, you know, to reach that level of students in the middle schools. And so we're beginning to think ahead. High school, vertical alignment, summer work to make sure that what do teachers need to know and be able to do with their students to move their students forward, so that we could minimize whatever gaps emerge, you know, as hopefully more of our kids come back into school. As you can see for mathematics, it's laid out there. Vertical alignment, we spent a lot of time talking about, you know, for each grade, what's the essential knowledge that we need, right? And especially in those transition grades from 5 to 6, for instance, okay, 8 to 9, right? Making sure that students are, as much as humanly possible, ready to learn well and to be successful. And for those who struggle, you know, what can we do for them now to make sure that when they come back to school full time, they're ready? Ready. Next slide, please. Okay, and so give you a moment to review this slide here. So we have many different efforts going on to look at student support. We had an SEL meeting this afternoon. We've had we have a middle school admin meeting tomorrow, where we're looking at what types of supports do we need for students? What are we seeing now that some of the students are back in the building, all right, and in remote as we head to the end of the year? And so looking at, you know, we have our promising futures, where we're working with a group of teachers at the secondary level and the elementary level to build programming in so we can support struggling students starting now and into the summer and into the fall. Looking at a universal screening process to see where students are, so we can really individualize that instruction as much as possible. Mario, I think this is yours.
So I have the next two slides really on instruction and assessment. In instruction, we know we need to provide high quality professional development on what does instruction look like for our teachers. So when we visit classrooms, we want to make sure that our instruction is aligned with the latest research. We want to make sure that there's tier 1 instruction, and that means for all students. So all students receive high quality instruction in general ed classrooms. We want to make sure there's ongoing student assessments, again, with the universal screening. If we go to the next slide, Gabby, around the assessments. And this is, again, aligned with the strategic plan on how do we build a comprehensive assessment system. This year, we know that with the pandemic, we've been using more formative assessments at the classroom level than in our standardized assessments. And so there's a lot of work going on with our steering committees to make sure that we have the most reliable data, and we'll continue that work over the summer and throughout next year. So as Mr. Parker said, our steering committees are doing yeoman's work. We must commend our teachers and our administrators who are part of that to make sure there is an alignment between our curriculum, our instruction, on our assessments on a daily basis, and truly that our assessments are going back to drive instruction at the student level. And then the other aspect, and we'll be talking about this further at our curriculum and evaluation meetings and future steering committees, on what does that K-12 vertical alignment look like. Next slide. Mr. Parker, we're back to what does high quality professional development. This is your slide.
And we have a lot of things going on. You know, we've met with the Teacher Development and Evaluation Committee just, was it yesterday, Mario, or a few days ago? We have reading specialists, you know, embarking on starting today, Wilson training. So we're getting, we're trying to get the best professional development for our groups of teachers. We have big new generation standards, science standards that's kicking underway for our science curriculum. You know, we're training people for every aspect of students' lives, not just academic. But as you know, this year we had elementary and secondary had suicide prevention training. So we're looking at SEL in all its aspects as well. Elementary was earlier in the year, and on Friday we had almost 700 secondary teachers and staff participate in a suicide prevention training with Connors Klein. So teachers are getting themselves ready to be, and staff, to be as best in the best position to take their kids to the next level. And so there's that.
So tonight we're here to review the budget, and I must commend Mr. Donovan, Dr. McKinney, our building administrators and our teachers for presenting a really thoughtful budget and working again with Mr. Parker in my office. As you can see, the evolution over 3 years from 2020 to 2022, there really isn't a big change in our budget request. That being said, even though Mr. Parker and I talked really fast tonight, it all goes back to every conversation in the district around curriculum, instruction, and assessment. Those 4 essential questions. What do we want all students to know and be able to do? How are we going to measure it? What are we going to do if the students do not meet proficiency? And what are we going to do to accelerate? So within this budget, I just want to highlight some switching of numbers, especially in those bigger areas. But this is a really K-12 budget that meets everyone's needs. And we can see over the years on how it has been a comprehensive approach. So some of the bigger items that you'll see around like educational supplies, you'll see that in 2020, it was around $82,000. In 2022, it's at $250,000. In those lines, there has been just a shifting of new supplies. The biggest line item and transfer over in educational supplies is elementary amplified kits is going to be new in grade 5, and that's roughly $140,000 in that line item. There's also in that line additional foundations consumables for K through 2, high school graphing calculators, and that's the big difference. In prior years, we used iReady toolboxes were in those lines, but again, so we're just adding forward. I also want to highlight the shift in books. In 2020, there was a big focus in purchasing elementary guiding reading books. In 2021, there was a focus on elementary literacy books. In 2022, the focus in the book line is around AP science books, AP math books, and high school ELA books. So you can see the evolution on the focus on those curriculum lines in in the book line. So I just want to be really clear that even though it seems like it's level funded, we are shifting our resources to those areas of needs. So it's a real thoughtful approach and being cognizant of our bottom line. So again, even though it is only a decrease of $5,000, we are meeting the needs of our pre-K through 12 students in the line of curriculum instruction and assessment. And that's the big lines in budget. So at this time, I'll open it up for any questions around our budget.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments, questions? Ms. Zine?
Yeah, I think I'm speaking to the right people with this question, but I'm not sure. But in the past, as I mentioned to Dr. McKinney before, we always got charts. And in that chart, it broke down each classroom, Birch Hill, how many kids they had, how many teachers they had, how many were in the classes. If you go back, I'm sure you could find what we did previously. It was wonderful because for me, I'm not an educator, but to me, in the elementary schools, it's important that we not have our classes so large that our teachers can't deal with it. And so the only way I can know that is if I know, are our classes 27, 28, or are they 20? It makes a huge difference. They also had a block that broke down and told you how many travelers they have, because some of the kids come in just for, for music and art and physical education, those kinds of things. So they also had those in it, but they had it broken down so that you knew that they were only there partially. And it also had a line, as I recall, for how many were special education in each class. It was very informative. It also went into the high schools and did a similar breakdown. So I would respectfully request that if at all possible, for me, the size of the classroom is critical. It's always been something that I used as foundational, if you will. So I would really appreciate. And the other question that I would ask you is, where these kids, some of them are just getting back into the classroom. So are we systematically testing these kids to see what they lost, and how are we even able to, with there again, the size of the class I think is critical in that, because if you have a child who's fallen way behind, obviously that child requires more attention than the child who maybe had help at home. I don't know. So I would just like to, and then the other thing I would like to know about is summer school. In the past, we didn't always fill up our summer school classes. And it would seem to me that now with the losses that I think we have had happen due to this pandemic, and the fact that they didn't have in-person learning as much as one would have liked, then what damage did it do, and how? So how can we maximize our summer school to try to take those who fell the furthest behind and give them a chance to catch up? So that would be my hot air. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Yeah, a couple of things, Ms. Dean. Number one, we're going to have a summer school at both high schools this summer. And usually it's one they alternate every other year. So we're going to have 2 summer schools for kids, because we believe that kids will come to summer school if it's in the schools that they go to, community schools, right? Because we anticipate there will be some gaps. Now, having talked to some teachers, there has been some loss that they noticed, but others are saying, no, not as much as they thought there would be in some skills. So that's, from my perspective, I can offer that to you right now. But Guidance and I met not too long ago, where we're thinking about, okay, what can we do not only in the summer, but as I said, between now and the end of the year. All right, what programming do we need? All right, what programs already exist that we need to expand so that we can help kids sooner rather than later? All right, so we are working on that. All right, and not simply trying to wait until summer school, if at all possible. So,
And the testing?
we are working on testing because our question from both Mario and I, how can we measure the loss? You know, there's SAS coming up. Some kids just took the SAT at the high schools, the first wave. And I think the 26 is another one that we can use as a benchmark. And the formative assessments that teachers have just been doing on their own. But we are trying to gather that and see what data do we have, what do we use, and what assessments can we devise to see where kids are at. So that's all happening in real time.
So Dr. McKinney, I think wants to add to that. Go ahead. You have the floor, Dr. McKinney.
Thank you, Mr. Greeno. If I could, I think Mr. Donovan wants to speak to the enrollment piece. Is that correct, Dan?
Yes, we'll have in your package Friday, we'll have the enrollment analysis that was requested by Mrs. Johnson a week or so ago. We'll also have that specific sheet that Mrs. Ziem mentioned, number for all the elementary schools, number of teachers, students in the class, special education. That's being worked on. So hopefully, excuse me, both of those will be in your package on Friday, and we can discuss that next Wednesday at the meeting.
We did
Thank you, Dan.
get
I didn't mean for you to get choked up during talking about the enrollment reports. Yeah.
Well said.
we did get some information, teacher positions by location and type, as of February in the packet. Although it doesn't give, I don't think it gives a number of students per class, but it does have the schools and the classroom teachers and special ed teachers.
They even gave us paraprofessionals, if I'm not mistaken, so that you knew if they had a high class, you knew that they had paras in those classes, because obviously the more students you have, the more you need a para. And with the numbers that I think Dr. Andre, or I don't know which one of the two gentlemen just mentioned how many, obviously most of our paras are special education. I think there were like 40, maybe 49 or something that were not special ed, and 351 maybe were special ed. So from my perspective, those are the best kept secrets we have. Those paraprofessionals are worth their weight in gold. All of our staff are. I'm
Right.
sorry.
That's all right. Dr. McKinney?
Just checking. Mr. Ziem, did we answer your 3 questions, ma'am?
Well, I think if I understood, we really haven't dealt with the testing yet. So we haven't come up with the tests that we're going to use to try to find out where our kids are now, to find out what gaps we might have. Is that correct?
Well, I guess I would frame it like this. I don't know if you learn everything from a test. So our teachers are used to kids coming in at different levels, and they've been working with them daily, quick formative assessments and saving time for instruction, enrichment, remediation. Dr. Andre is going to give an update on the state testing that we have to do per the federal government and the state compliance that's going to happen. And that would be a data source, but it's not the only data source. We don't learn about kids' progress just from one test. I would say overall, the more conversations I've been having, kids are learning. I think our biggest challenge, what I'm hearing from principals and teachers, is engagement. They grow tired. Kids grew tired of being remote for a period of time. And now that they're back in schools and they're seeing their teachers, their friends, engagement's on the rise. So we're starting to remediate the learning gaps that happened due to the pandemic. And that's going to take some time. It's not going to happen in 3 months. You're not going to make up a year in 3 months. So it's going to be something we'll offer options over the summer, but also we're going to supplement it over the course of next year with some other options to get kids up to speed, because it's just going to take a slow, deliberate, structured process for kids to make those little gaps up. So I hope that's...
Mr. Parker mentioned about the summer school for the high school, and I think the middle schools, I assume the middle schools were included in those 2 high school ones. What about the elementaries and their summer schools? Are we making progress in that area?
So, oh, go ahead, Dr. Arnberg.
Either way, so we are looking at K-12 summer learning, especially around our former programs around like Power Scholars and programs such as that. But we're also having conversations at the with the elementary building principals on can they offer individual summer schools per building because they know their students best and how to recruit their students and teachers to their own program. So I just want to be really cognizant. There's a lot of work going on. In the budget we're presenting today is only the operational budget that we're presenting. We know that we need to look at like the conversations between and the assessments between now and June, and what are those power standards that we want all students to know and be able to do? What are those formative and summative assessments that our teachers are working so hard at? And once we glean that information, we'll be able to really develop very specific and hopefully enjoyable experiences in the summer. And then we'll also talk about what's the unfinished learning for next year that can roll into the curriculum and what are those assessments. But that's also when we look at our title funds, our federal grants, that's a revenue source. That's Title I, Title II, Title III, IDEA, Title IV. We also know that there's money that's coming in for CARES to address learning loss or acceleration of learning going forward. So that's another pool of money. But tonight's really about the operating budget and just really supplies in those classrooms. But the questions that you're asking, I really appreciate because I think that was slide 2 and 3. Right? Those were our essential questions. What do we want our kids to know and be able to do? And our teachers are really working hard on answering those questions so that we have a comprehensive assessment system so we can make really specific interventions or accelerations kind of moving forward. But tonight, we're really just talking about one pool of money, that operating budget. So that's why it doesn't seem as comprehensive if we brought in our title money or what we're planning on professional development or summer programs. That's going to be another pool of money that we're developing and moving forward. And we'll talk about that at future board meetings.
Thank you.
Okay. I saw Mrs. Johnson next. You have the floor, Mrs. Johnson.
Thank you. I had to unmute myself and I had to take a picture. Somehow I keep losing papers like last night. I've got too many papers around. And I just want to say, you know, I did get an email from people saying, how come the presentation isn't up on the website? And I guess if it was up on the website, I could have printed it off during this whole thing. But I apologize. I lost my papers again. And hopefully I can get a copy of it tomorrow to print out. I get this is the operational budget. And I guess when I hear pool of money coming in, it raises a red flag with me with pools of money. But I guess my question is, with all this that I took a picture of on my phone, and Mrs. Ziem really went and asked excellent questions here. What about the seniors? Where's the pool of money for the seniors? That some of them might have fallen down because they haven't been in school. They don't have that second chance this summer, really, because they've graduated. So what about the seniors that have fallen by the wayside? So I guess that's one of my biggest concerns here is our senior population. So can somebody answer me that with this pool of money here for next year's budget? How are we going to bring them up to grade level if by some chance they've fallen down?
Well, if they've fallen down, you know, I'll just speak with what I know. You know, the processes that we already have in place for any student, all right, who is struggling with the guidance department, the building administrations at the high school, reaching out to other support services like the youth council. We're trying to keep an eye on them and get them up to speed and prioritizing them. So I don't think we're leaving seniors behind, okay, because we know that they're not coming back. And so as far as I see, the high schools are trying to make them a priority and identifying them, you know, and but they have not communicated, you know, acute concern for the seniors per se. Okay, so that gives me reason to be hopeful. All right, and so we're putting school processes in place, all right, because we know that they're graduating, okay, and we know that they're not coming back to the buildings. And so all our school processes that we would put in place as if they were here, we're doing our best to replicate now, to move them, make sure that there's a safety net for them.
Well, I guess, you can't do in 2.5 months what should have been done all year long with some of these students. And so I guess this is only the operating budget, and this operating budget where we're going to get Title I, this is all government money that goes into the pool, and we keep printing more. Is any of this going to be part of that 12.9 million that got leaked out like 3 budget sessions ago that shouldn't have been leaked out? Loose lips sink ships. What can I say?
We just received confirmation of those ESSER funds, and we will present to the board what those funds could be used for.
Is that part of that 12.9 million?
Yes.
Yes. So if we're going to get 12.9 million from a source, so I guess I can't wait to see what we can use them for, because I'm sure in those departments, we probably don't need some of the money that's in the budget. Because I'm looking at this budget very carefully. These students have been out of school for a year. Merrimack Elementary just went back full time. We're not back in the classroom full time. Kids fall behind, and I'm listening to this whole thing. Summer school, we're going to bring officers, we're going to try to get them assessments. But again, how do you do what they've lost in a year? And then some of them we're going to probably promote on to the next grade. So if they're in 3rd grade, we're going to put them into 4th grade, but they haven't even learned 3rd grade a lot. So I have a lot of concerns here, and how we're going to be spending this money. Thank you very much.
Okay. Go ahead, Dr. McKinney.
Again, we will present our proposal for utilizing those funds. I don't agree with the characterization that all kids are falling behind, all kids are behind the 8 ball. Again, the conversation has been around engagement. Now that we're back in person, we've offered Friday supports, we've done office hours in person, we've done everything we can to bring kids up to speed. And I think we're making slow and steady progress. Mr. Greeno.
I agree, Dr. McKinney. I agree, Dr. McKinney. Our kids have been in school, even though it was remote. They're still in school and they're still learning. My daughter did half of her senior year remote, and she didn't fall behind. And the COVID impacts different kids differently. Some kids adapt, and our teachers were really scrambling and adapting and making it work. So it doesn't mean just because some kids might have fallen behind they're not where we expect them to be. It doesn't mean all kids have fallen behind. So I don't think all of our kids are behind.
Well, I didn't really say that all our kids. I said kids have fallen behind, and I'd like to, hopefully we will find out the numbers that have fallen behind. I'm glad that we were putting in place the suicide prevention. And I mentioned that at a full board meeting, and I got shut down one night. That was when I was on vacation, when I mentioned about suicide, that kids have been committing suicide across the country, and I got shot down on that. But I'm glad that we're doing something to prevent that with the training here, because that's something we should never overlook, and what our students have gone through in this past year. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree. We shouldn't overlook suicide. Is very serious. It's a very serious issue. I think I saw Ms. Brown's hand up. Did you have a comment, a question?
Yeah, so thank you very much. So I guess in regards to learning loss, I think I would agree probably with the district that I think that we're still working hard to address the core competencies and make sure that they have, the kids are strong enough to be prepared for the next grade level. I have actually spoken with Dr. Andrade and Mr. Parker in my curriculum meetings, specifically about how they're actively attacking summer school programming for this summer. So I'm really pleased to hear that from all of them. And I think our focus for this spring and moving forward to the fall really needs to be on social emotional learning and making sure that our students' emotional needs are being met. Because I think that's probably where the areas where they need the most right now. But my question was actually related specifically to the budget. And it is about you mentioned the Amplify kits. So the Amplify kits, I think that's one of the biggest single expenditure line items. My question is that is that going to be an annual expense, or is it a one-time large purchase and then you replace the consumables for the next year? Dr. McKinney?
Beat me to the punch, Dr. McKinney.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I had my mute on.
So one-time expense, we're following the recommendations from the science pilot. So this year was 5th grade, next year is 4th grade, following year will be 3rd grade. So these materials last and sustain the grade levels for a period of time. They're not consumable. It's not an annual cost.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions or comments on the presentation? I don't see it. Oh, I do. Ms. Bishop.
I just have a question about the books, and I may have missed a part of it. My computer kind of glitches out sometimes. In regards to the books we're buying, I know we're doing a lot of stuff electronically now. Is there a cost difference in doing electronic literature instead of getting the paper?
So the books we're purchasing next year are mostly AP books, which are paper books. And so it is more materials. There are some subscriptions that also do have a digital access. So once you have the AP subscription, you also have a digital component to it. So, but these are hard copy textbooks. But we are looking at, in general, of how do we transition more to digital resources. So,
okay, just hoping we kept that on our radar. I know we have all those Chromebooks coming in, and might as well use them if we have them and save the environment a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're also looking at open education resources, or what's also free. So there's a lot of materials that we can retrieve through libraries and other resources that, again, that do not cost anything. And as we invest more in technology, every student will have access to a digital resource on their Chromebook or whatever device. And what's nice about digital resources are with the subscription, or if they're free, they're updated on an annual basis. You don't have to purchase new books every year. So as more information comes in, it's automatically updated. So I agree with you that we're looking into those resources as well.
And are we locked in by a contract to those books, or can we switch them? Can we switch them out if we find that we are able to be more tech savvy with our academics?
No, the recommendations from the teachers are the textbooks right now, especially for AP books. But
Yeah.
we'll look at those moving forward. But this year is AP focus.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Oden, did you have a question or comment?
No, not at this point, Mr. Guarino. Thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Brown?
I had a follow-up question to Ms. Bishop's question. For the AP textbooks, are those like college texts that can be recycled from one year to the next? I mean, do we have a couple years that we can use the same thing, or is it all new each year?
I can answer that. Generally, yes. And we certainly did that when I taught AP. You know, you can use them. And so I'm using history as my example because that's what I taught. You know, so when the history changes, you know, then you get the updates, you know. But a good AP textbook, it's not just the content, but it's also the skills that people feel that, you know, you can teach because of how the material is presented. It should have a several-year shelf life. All right, so, you know, the year after next year, we should not have to be buying new AP texts.
Mr. Guarino, may I?
Yes, Dr. McKinney.
It's usually like a 10-year window for the AP textbooks. So that way the kids are exposed to the content and knowledge that's going to be in the AP exams. And we've kind of, in some areas, fallen out of compliance with that. So that's why we have requests in next year's budget, and we ordered some this year. And the other piece to Ms. Bishop's question around books, if we could go back in time to March of last year, just as we were going away, we had used one-time funds to order a bunch of elementary literacy materials. So there are boxes of great books for kids to use at the elementary level. Hopefully they're using them now, as a matter of fact, and not waiting. So thank you.
Okay, Ms. Zine?
Going to the question about the books, if indeed they are updated annually, then how do they pay for the work to do that? Is there an annual charge to the district, like you buy the books and there's an initial cost, and then every year for the upgrades, there's an additional cost? Am I repetitive with that? You have to keep it simple for me, that KISS.
If I may, so the example I gave, that's not going to be for the AP books. As Dr. McKinney said, the AP books will be for an 8 to 10 year stretch.
Yes.
But there are other contracts that are solely digital resources that it is an annual subscription. So it might be $1 per student or whatever that's going to be. So it's an annual subscription that'll be much less than a $60,000 one-time purchase, but you'll get those continual updates because it is an annual subscription. So, but we don't have any of those in this year's budget.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So I think we're going to move on to our next item agenda, which is athletics.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Make sure I share the right one here. Everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I feel like we've spent a lot of time together lately, but I appreciate you taking time to listen again this evening about information about our athletic programs and specifically about next year's budget. Just a quick note, in addition to the presentation, you do have the cover sheet, as well as I believe you have been forwarded the appendices that go along with it. Some of the appendices are repeated information of what's in the PowerPoint, just a little bit bigger so you can see it better, as some of it is more detailed or expanded information, and some is completely just additional information I thought you'd be interested in. Oops, click over here. So we've talked a lot about why education-based athletics are so important throughout the pandemic and why these programs are so important in the lives of our students. It's important to mention it here again as you begin to prepare about making difficult decisions with our budget. Many label athletics as an extracurricular, but in fact they are co-curricular. As Mrs. Brown just mentioned a few minutes ago about the need to focus on social emotional learning, our athletic programs is one way to do that. And I believe you've seen the importance of that as we've lived through the past year with this pandemic. Our athletic programs truly extend the learning that takes place in the classroom. Students who participate in our interscholastic athletic programs often earn better grades, have positive mental health, and are generally physically healthy and have increased their social development. Many of our students develop and exercise leadership skills through our athletic programs. And involvement in school sports, the emphasis being on school sports, education-based athletics, is vital to their social, emotional, and mental health of our students. Our student athletes are held to a higher academic and behavior standard, and athletic provides the opportunities listed here, as well as many, many more. Not only do our athletic programs provide activities and a sense of belonging for our student athletes, but also for all of our students in all of our schools, as well as the community as a whole. One of the really difficult things this year with our restrictions on spectators has been having to tell students that they can't come to games, that we had a north-south basketball game and the gym was not full.
having to say to, 1950 graduates of Nashua High School, sorry, you can't come to the North-South football game. So that's been really difficult, and it's really shown how important our athletic programs are to the entire community. Participation information. This is the 2018-2019 school year participation data. Without spring sports last year, it made no sense to provide for you that data. Data this year is going to be skewed very low because our numbers have been low this year for a variety of reasons. So Appendix E has much more detailed information on our high school participation as well as our programs. As you can see here, between our middle school and our high schools, we offer 139 different teams. These are our existing high school programs. So you can see Appendix D will go along with this slide, that it outlines for you where we have JV programs, where we have freshman teams. This information gives you a lot of the diversity that we offer in our high school programs. We had 2 state champion divers this year, and when I tweeted that out, kids were like, oh my God, didn't even know we had a dive program. So we do have a wealth of offerings at the high school level. Similar to that are our offerings at our middle school programs. It's important that when you look at these programs, that at this point in time, we only offer 1 team per gender per school. Our field hockey program is a little unique because Elm Street students, Fairground students, Pennachuck students all compete together on 1 field hockey program. We're able to get sticks in those girls' hands and teach them the skills of the game, but we wouldn't be able to sustain 3 separate middle school teams. I believe Mrs. Bishop, your daughter's a field hockey player, right? Yeah, I see that smile. Some programs that we've talked about over the past few years going into, yes, we have 32 varsity sports at each of our high schools. We have 12 programs in each of our middle schools. What are some things looking down the road that we could potentially add to our offerings? Boys volleyball at the high school is the single most inquired about program. People ask about that program every year. So that would be something that somewhere down the line, I'd really like to see us really consider adding that to our program. It would be cost-wise about the same as our volleyball program, but the advantage would be we already have net systems in our high schools. We already have volleyballs in our high schools, so that the startup costs would not be that significant. And we've talked about our co-op ice hockey program and the need and the possibility that at some point in the future we may separate from our co-op teams. In order to do that, we really need to invest some money in a junior varsity ice hockey team. At our middle schools, as we all know, middle school is a very difficult time for our students, so adding some programs there would be very beneficial. Last year, we did have a unified basketball pilot program in our middle schools and would like to see that in the future become one of their regular offerings. Unfortunately, due to low interest and low enrollment, we weren't able to offer unified basketball at either the middle or the high schools this year. One thing we have talked about for the past several years and is very important is the concept of B teams or JV teams at our middle schools. We are often cutting more students than we are keeping in our middle school programs. And often our students who are cut as middle school students never return. I'd really like to see us consider moving towards including our B teams or JV teams, whatever you want to call them at the middle school level, through our restructuring of our middle schools. You know, a goal of the fall of 2023 to be able to at least start introducing B teams in our middle schools. I think that would be a great goal. Bring something new to the middle schools as we do that whole big restructuring new middle school project. Lacrosse has grown so much in popularity over the past several years that a lot of our students are playing lacrosse outside of schools. So I think it would be a real great addition to our middle schools if we're able to add those in some capacity. Giving you a bird's eye picture of our athletic department. This is our entire staff. So there are 178 students excuse me, not students. There are 178 people overall in the athletic department. And as I look at this, I'm not on here, so I guess there's really 179 people in the athletic department. And it's important for everybody to know that this does not include any of our volunteer coaches. These are only paid staff within our department. As you've heard me talk about, recruiting and retaining quality coaches is becoming increasingly more difficult. On average, I hire between 55 and 60 new coaches every year. And that number, I'll be honest with you, was much, much higher this year with COVID. We had a lot of coaches resign for that reason. Currently, only about 45% of our coaches teach or work in some capacity in our district, and I'd really like to see us work hard to increase that. The stipends are a piece of that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But currently, just to throw this out there for anybody who's watching, we still have 4 openings for spring coaches. So we're still looking for a JV lacrosse coach, freshman baseball, and 2 track coaches at Pennachuck. And we're looking at my board, we already have 6 openings for next year. Few positions, if we add those additional programs at the middle and high school, obviously we would have to add coaches. We talked a little bit last year about adding assistant varsity coaches for each of our programs. Many of our programs, it's a varsity coach and a JV coach, and that's it. So adding in assistant coaches for a variety of reasons, including safety and supervision, would be something I'd like to look into in the future. One position at the department level that I really would like to consider in the future as a stipended position is a position that would handle the marketing, the social media, and the fundraising. We try to stay up on it as much as possible with Twitter. Honestly, we haven't ventured out to any of the other social media platforms at this point yet, just because there's so much to manage. But if we could look at potentially adding this, much like our equipment manager is a stipended position, this would be really helpful for all 5 of our secondary schools. So getting into the numbers, our sports programs. So each program, baseball, girls basketball, boys basketball, skiing, swim, have budget items in the operating budget for those 6 items. Middle school, high school, always coaches stipends, officials, or in transportation. And then some of our programs have rentals, game staff, or police detail. To the right, all of those items come from other funding sources. They do not come out of the operating budget. So, excuse me, I take that back. Many of them come out of the operating budget, just not in each individual program line. There's an athletic program. So all of the equipment just comes out of that one that I don't necessarily put, I've just bought 10 dozen baseballs. So that comes out of the baseball line. I do mass equipment and supply purchases for all 5 of our schools simultaneously. The programs at the bottom, I just want to make sure that everybody on the board understands. You will see boys cross country and the other sports in the budget, but you will not see girls cross country. These are sports that are so closely aligned in everything that they do that we budget both the boys and the girls programs together. It's just easier for record keeping. They take buses together for the most part. So to take a bus bill and divide it into 2 separate programs, several years ago, we just combined those together. Just want to make sure people realize we do have both genders. They're just budgeted together. Couple notes about creating next year's budget. Those of you who know me know I'm very detailed and have a math background. So looking at last year's numbers made absolutely no sense to me. We didn't have a spring season. I moved money around to pay for different things. So I completely ignored last year's budget when I created this year's. Another thing, those 2 account lines, the 54487 and 71999, if you look to previous years, they look different. Last year, we created the 71999 as an equipment line, where the 54 line is an equipment repair line. So there was some movement of money between those 2 lines. So I just don't want anybody to be confused over those. So in looking at this year, I focused mostly on expenses from 2 years ago, as well as averages over the past 4 years and any contractual obligations that we needed to meet. I was a little ahead of myself a couple minutes ago when I mentioned things that are not in the operating budget. We do not have any budget lines that cover uniforms. That all comes out of our special revenue fund. And that money is solely from admission to programs, admission to events. So our football and our basketball games, admission to those events cover uniforms for all of our programs. So we had a complete freeze on uniform purchases this year because we did suspend admission to those events. I didn't think it made sense to restrict attendance and then also charge people. And large scale equipment purchases come out of the Athletic Expendable Trust. So now the numbers. Here's our budget. As you know, the budget is by location, then by program, then by account. So this just breaks down the budget by our 4 different programs, our administrative program, the 2 different high schools, and then all 3 of the middle schools are budgeted in Elm Street. So we do have athletic programs in the other 2 schools. Just again, it was much easier to put it all together. When you look at this, it looks like we're asking for an almost 4% increase, but the majority of that increase comes from 3 very specific items that I'll address in a moment. This is supposed to have a chart with it too. Sorry about that. Not sure what happened to that one, but this is breaking down. It looks better on your screen than it does on mine. I'm glad to hear that. There's some labels missing on my screen. So this breaks it down by account rather than by location. Something that's really important to notice is that about 2/3 of our funding goes to paying people. You have the stipends for our coaches, our athletic coordinators, and our equipment managers. You have full-time wages for the athletic director and our department administrative assistants, part-time wages for game staff, game officials, and then our contract services include paying our athletic trainers and our neuropsychologists. So about 2/3 of our budget is staffing. So here are the 3 lines, 3 categories that make up the most significant part of our budget increase. The user fee reduction. We'll see more information about this in a few slides, but we're collecting less and less of our user fees every year. As COVID has struck, we are receiving more requests for financial waivers. So we've reduced the anticipated revenue by $10,000 for each high school for a total of $20,000 change. Removing the Penguin Plunge revenue. For those of you who've been around a while, you know, several years ago when we began our unified sports program, it was all grant funded. And then we absorbed it into the operating budget, but we kept a piece that would come from Penguin Plunge revenue, that would come from fundraising. And it's been $2,500 per high school for the past few years since we've added it to the operating budget. And I'm removing that because I'm not really sure why I hadn't thought of this before, but they are the only program that we were requiring them to do fundraising. Most of our programs do fundraising, but it's not reflected in any part of the operating budget. So it seemed odd that we had one of our programs require that. And then transportation is an increase of a little over $6,000 in the budget. If you refer to Appendix J, you can see the breakdown by sport, and you can also see the increase in hourly wage over the past 5 or 6 years. And it's been a $3.55 increase per hour over the past 3 years. So that's one of the contractual obligations that, so these 3 items alone make up the majority of the increase. Few contractual changes. I'm not going to go through all the details on this one, but just you can see that these are increases that have to happen because of contracts we have. Appendix G and H have more information for you on our coaching stipends. And it's important to know that at budget time, any open position gets budgeted at the base stipend as opposed to any experience level. So at times we do go a little bit over that depending who gets hired into those open positions. So my least favorite topic, user fees. There's a lot of information in the appendices. I believe there's 4 different appendices about this. As you can see here, so this is the history since user fees started in our district. You can see what was actually collected and transferred to the operating budget versus what was budgeted. So for example, you can see last year that we had a deficit of almost $32,000 in what we had anticipated collecting from our students. We talked about that in the spring when we made some changes and things like that. So we were able to cover that with other expenses that we didn't use last year. But this is, you can see that there's only been 1 year that we collected what we had anticipated collecting and had budgeted for. This is a 5-year history showing, as you know, anyone who is a free and reduced student, they are automatically waived their athletic user fee. So you can see the changes there. Students who are 3-season athletes and pay for fall and winter are waived their fee in the spring. We have dual sport athletes. We have some students, a lot of track athletes might play basketball, but also compete in track in the winter. We have a lot of skiers who will ski and also do another sport. So if they do 2 sports in the same season, we only charge them for 1. And then managers of our teams, we also do not charge them. And unfortunately, there's always a little bit each year that for whatever reason, we just don't collect from students, no matter how many invoices we send them, no matter how many times we nag them and plead for them to pay their fees. It's just reality, we don't get it. Athletics and COVID, just a few things this year. Obviously challenges, we've had lower than normal participation, all of the different protocols, the quarantines, things like that. I really want to give a shout out to our coaches. I've said this to them and I'd like to say it publicly that all of the athletic COVID protocols has really added extra layers to the responsibilities that we put on our coaches, and our coaches have been champs through it throughout the whole season, and I expect no differently this spring. So I really want to extend appreciation and gratitude for everything that they have done. COVID positives, looking at some of these things, that gives a whole new meaning to the phrase COVID positive, because usually that's seen as such a taboo and negative thing. But some positives have come out of running an athletic program in this pandemic. And some of those is we figured out how to live stream some events. Pete Johnson and his crew over at Nashua ATV have streamed more of our events than in 1 year than they ever have, and that's been great. It's provided a sense of normalcy for our students and some of our staff, to be honest with you. I actually had extra staff because of the protocols and limits on spectators. So I hired door people even at our middle school games, and I had people begging me to work our games because they were just so excited to see the students. So that really helped for some of our staff as well. And then obviously the connections and the social emotional learning that we have talked about quite a bit this year. So some more needs, top of the list. Appendix O is very lengthy and goes into these in much greater detail, but top of the list is we really need to sit down and revisit and increase our coaches' stipends. We probably have the lowest coaches' stipends in our division as well as in the surrounding areas. And we have coaches who are leaving. I've had coaches turn down jobs because they're weighing 2 options and one pays 2 or 3 times as much as we're paying in Nashua. We have a lot of our teachers who have part-time jobs and don't want to give up a full year part-time job for a $1,000 stipend when they're putting in anywhere from 20 to 30 hours a week doing coaching during the season. We talked about the new programs. We talked about the middle school B teams, as well as lingering over our head the potential separation from our co-op ice hockey teams, which would add about $13,000 to $15,000 to each high school budget. We did put in a request to the NHIAA to extend both North and South co-ops for the next 2-year cycle. We won't find out if that's been approved until this summer. So that's just something to think about. We are approved through next school year, so we don't have to worry about it for this budget, but after that could be a big addition because of that. And then the last slide is just a list of the appendices that you do have, and that's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gingras, for that presentation. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Ms. Gingras? I don't see anyone. Ms. Brown and then Ms. Bishop.
Ms. Bishop, you can go first. I need a sec.
Okay, thanks. Well, first off, Ms. Jiggers, of course, that was a fantastic presentation. For the B teams, do we have a rough number on how many students would be able to, not able to participate, but how many students would want to participate in those teams?
So that's a great question. So in Appendix O, there is data from 2015 through 2019 on the number of students who registered for a sport and then how many were on the team. So for example, if I look at boys basketball at Elm Street in 2018-19, there were 69 boys who registered for tryouts for boys basketball and only 21 were on the team. So that year we cut 48 boys from middle school boys basketball at that one school.
But the B team wouldn't accommodate 48 additional.
No, and again, we absolutely, there, in a program like that, that is so popular, right? You're right, we would still cut some students, but we might be able to keep 42 students in the program rather than only 21. So it will not be an open free-for-all because you can't run a basketball program with 48 kids. That just, nobody's going to get anything out of that. But it would provide an opportunity to at least keep some of the students. And the B teams run differently at some schools. Some schools will run them as a completely separate sport, a completely separate team, and enter into, in our Tri-County League, a Division 5 championship. Other schools treat it just as a JV team. So they still practice every day, just like at the high school. They practice every day, they have games, they have an end of the season jamboree, things like that. But it's students getting ready for, I don't want to use the word regular team, but I don't know what other adjective to use at this point, for the other team. A lot of times your B team students might be mostly sixth graders, because the reality is a sixth grader is just not as big and strong as an eighth grader is. You know, they really grow up quite a bit in those 3 years.
Oh, and then, so I know a lot about the Elm Street basketball. My daughter was the manager. Spent a lot of time hearing about how well the boys did.
Yep.
But if we had the B teams, who would they be competing against? Would they be competing with the same level students or the same level athletics, or would they be participating in other more JV? I know it's not JV in middle school, but is it a different level?
That's the easiest way to talk about it, because I think people understand the concept of JV and varsity at the high school. So the B teams would compete against other B team type teams. There are a lot. So for instance, in last year, there were 20 schools in the league that we compete in that had basketball B teams. So they would compete against those other B team level students. We would not take a JV like team and have them compete against a varsity like team.
And would we be looking at additional transportation costs if we opened up those additional team sports?
Yes. So basically, in whatever programs we would add B teams to, you would basically double the budget of that program. So looking at it, it would be about, our most popular sports are volleyball, boys and girls soccer, and boys and girls basketball. To add those 5 would be about a $54,000 increase for all 3 middle schools. So again, if we have a target of the fall of 2023 to start implementing this, maybe we don't add all 5 of them at the same time. Maybe we add one of them. You know, maybe we start with volleyball, then the following year we add basketball, then the following year we add soccer. So it could be a phase-in process, because obviously I know a $54,000 increase all at once would be difficult.
Is there, sorry, I'm sure I'm stomping on some people's toes, but I'm going to keep going. Is there, revenue that can be made off of the additional games, like with snack sales or ticket prices? I know we don't typically do tickets for middle school, but is that an option?
I guess you could start charging people to go to middle school games. I think that would be weird to start charging people to go to B team games, but not the other team. There's always opportunity for revenue, but just like we talked about with unified sports, it would be a slippery slope to say, in order to do this, we need those programs to raise X number of dollars into the operating budget. So that would be kind of difficult unless we did something like that across the board, which I'm not advocating for. So it would be additional transportation costs. It would be additional officials. It would be additional coaches' stipends.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a cost associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, within town, we have the luxury. We have 3 middle schools. So right there, that's 4 games on our schedule. That's not a lot of travel.
Right.
And a lot of times with the middle school, they tend to play much closer teams than we do at the high school.
Mm-hmm. And the benefit to the kids, obviously,
yes,
is immeasurable. So
So the 3 biggest challenges with the B teams are, number 1, obviously the funding, coming up with the additional money to basically double those programs. Number 2 would be hiring the coaches. We just talked about, the number of openings I still already have, being able to find not just a body that's there, but a qualified coach that could come in and move those kids forward with their skill level. And then the space, the gym and the field space at our middle schools. We already have, we're going to have 1 gym at each of the middle schools, and we already have 2 basketball teams and a cheer team and wrestling. And now we're going to add 2 more basketball teams. That's going to be tough. So there are definite challenges involved. So it's going to take some work once we, hit the ground running, that we make that commitment to move forward.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I think Ms. Brown's question has been answered.
Well, actually, so yes, but also I still want to speak if I may.
Go right ahead.
Most of my questions. Thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate it. And Jen for asking those questions. If there was one thing that I would change about your whole presentation, is on your final slide, I would have moved B teams to the top of the list, and my own priorities. Middle school kids, they're facing physical changes that aren't present in any other level of school. They've got some of the most emotional vulnerabilities of other levels of students, just because of the nature of middle school, junior high. And I think we need to find as many ways to keep as many kids engaged at those levels as possible. And this, we're not talking just COVID, we're talking all the time, every year. And I'll address it specifically from 2 perspectives that I've observed as a middle school parent. And as I was a student athlete and a student musician and artist, all those things through middle school and high school. And I think with the promotion of my parent generation moving up with club sports, it's kind of become an equity issue between kids who basically can afford club sports at a young age and kids who can't. And if we don't find ways to engage more of those kids at the lower level athletics, speaking of elementary and middle school, by the time they get to high school, they've checked out. So I find middle school B teams as an equitability issue. Additionally, from a female athlete perspective, girls specifically, there's so many studies that have been done that say if they go out for, let's say, the soccer team when they're in 7th grade and they don't make it, they may never kick a soccer ball again. I hope they don't. Get up, girls, if you're listening, get up and go back out the next year. But from that perspective and moving forward, and I know our budget is so lean this year that it's just probably not feasible, I will be advocating for that. And I'll tell you, when that new middle school opens, that is going to be a hot button issue for Jessica Brown. So there you go. That's more, I guess, a soapbox than anything else. But if there's any extra dollars, I would be happy to put them towards that program.
Can I just add one thing? This would be the most significant change to our athletic programs since the fall of 2004, when we became middle schools rather than junior high schools. That was the year that, the 9th graders moved up, the 6th graders moved up. We got rid of middle school football. We added soccer. So that was the most significant change, was in 2004. And I need to express time to plan for this, that it can't be in March when we're talking about next year's budget that it's approved that B teams are going to happen in the fall. Like, it really needs to be 2 to 3 year planning moving forward. So I just want to make sure everybody is aware of that, right down from, the coaches and the uniforms and figuring out the facilities and all of those pieces involved. It's really a big undertaking versus, like I said, finding out now that in August it's going to happen.
Thank you. I think our staff deserve a great deal of gratitude and thanks. Getting us through this pandemic, getting our kids back on the athletic field and keeping them safe and getting them moving, and at least bringing some semblance of normalcy. It wasn't an easy job, and athletics is very, very important. A lot of people might not think so. They might think it's just for a certain student, but I think it's important that we get all of our students moving. And that's why I brought up safe routes to school, because even if kids are not into athletics, just to have them walk back and forth to school or bicycle back and forth to school, they're moving, and it's about wellness. And we actually had, I know at Elm Street, we had a teacher over there. We had some teachers that were actually teaching wellness about eating right and getting exercise. And it speaks to their cognitive well-being as well. Kids are actually smarter, and they're more alert, and they do better. So and I'm glad you brought up that equity issue, Ms. Brown, because I know a lot of kids, they try out in middle school and then they don't have the opportunity. We have a lot of great programs. We have Biddy basketball. We have the PAL Police Athletic League. Every elementary school is involved in cross country. I know my kids were. They really weren't number one. They weren't great track stars, but they participated, and it was great. It was droves and droves of kids at the Nashua High North. It was great. We did it a couple of years in a row. So we really have some great programs, and it takes a lot to get the kids moving. And thank you. I really want to thank the staff for doing that. Even though not everybody's going to be a basketball player, a basketball star, or a football star, or a lacrosse star, we're still going to get the kids moving. Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
I do.
Go ahead. Ms.
Thank you. I had tried to chat you, but I guess that didn't work.
I didn't see it yet. That's okay.
Ms. Gingras, thank you for your presentation. It was very thorough. I have one question. When you were talking about 48 students who couldn't play basketball, have we thought about an intramural program at our middle schools? Just for, it doesn't have to be formal basketball with uniforms. They sometimes wear colored shirts on teams. Have we thought about that for our students at the middle school?
We have. That is something that each school has talked about in different ways. I know over at Fairgrounds, it's a little bit different, but they used to do a morning sports program that was run by some staff in the building, and kids came in first thing in the morning and were in the gym playing a variety of different activities. So I know it's a little bit different than intramurals, but that was something that was going on over at Fairgrounds. At Elm Street for the past several years, obviously because of the pandemic, it didn't happen this year. A few of the teachers in the building ran an intramural floor hockey program, a couple of sessions during the year. Nobody's really taken the ball and run with it in terms of basketball or any of the other sports. The number one thing that would have to happen with intramurals is you'd have to have staff willing to step up and run something like that. So it is something that we have talked about. It's something that I think there would be interest for. Again, it also comes with the challenge of getting people in to do it staff wise, and then also finding the facility and the space to be able to do it.
Mhm. Thank you. I know we had that at Amherst Street. We had a couple of teachers that would take kids in the morning and they'd have a field floor hockey. So, but thank you. I just think that's a financially easier thing to do than to have a B team. It might be cheaper and more kids involved. So thank you.
Okay,
You're
thank
welcome.
you. Yep. Is there anyone else that has any questions or comments? I think that's it. Thank you, Ms. Gingras. Mr. Donovan, go ahead, Mr. Donovan, and then Ms. Giulio.
Okay, so I just wanted to, in your package that you received last Friday, the items in section 2, that is all the data on number of teachers, what type of programs they teach, what schools they're at. Same goes for the custodians, the guidance counselors, where they are compared to number of students, the secretaries. So all that data, except for the paras, was sent to you. The paras should be able to be sent to you for this week. And I just want to note that, so we are now done with presentations. Like I said, we will have next week, you'll hopefully get in your package Friday, head count analysis, the elementary sheet Mrs. Zine was speaking to. If you have any questions, looking at all the detail we had given you, if you could sort of send those to me in advance, I can have answers next Wednesday. If you bring them up Wednesday night, I might be able to answer them, I might not. But I just sort of request that because basically that's sort of the last set of information we'll be sharing with you. Then it's basically your budget. So you can decide what you'd like to do the rest of that meeting next week. The following week is Thursday, not Wednesday. That's the public hearing. And then the following week, April 7th, I would assume you would be voting on the budget. Now, obviously, if you have more discussions and more questions, you can set up more meetings. But at this point, that is what the schedule looks like.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Ms. Giulio, you had your hand up?
I was actually waving goodbye and thanking Ms. Gingras and her staff for everything that they've done during the past year and for what they're going to do in the future. So I really didn't have anything else to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else that has any questions or comments?
Yes, when Mr. Donovan was talking about 2A, the first sheet on this talks about kindergarten, but I don't see any other sheet in here that refers to the other grades at the elementary level.
No, that, Dottie, that sheet will show up next week.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay, that's the one that I think you brought up, Mrs. Oden brought up, I mean, Mrs. Zine brought up tonight. That sheet, that'll list by school, by class. That'll be
Okay.
next week.
Oh, okay, but it will be similar to the one we got this week on kindergarten.
Well, it'll be the one that you've seen for the last many years.
Okay, okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. So I think that we're at the end of the agenda. I think we can adjourn, but we have to stay around for a special meeting,
Yeah, we have a non-public meeting after.
a non-public meeting. Okay. So last time we did this, we adjourned, and then we had to go back into a regular meeting. Do we want to just go into non-public? Or should we have to open up a special meeting and then go into a non-public?
I don't think we're voting on anything after, so
Okay.
we can stay off air, and I will just update I'll update our team about when we officially end the non-public meeting.
Okay, so we can adjourn then, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded. Oh, Ms. Ziem. Okay.
Sorry.
That's
I
okay.
will second the motion. Did someone else second?
No, you guys did. Okay, so Ms. Bishop votes yes. Ms. Gilio,
Yes.
Ms. Oden,
No.
no on adjourning.
I think you have to keep it open so you can seal the minutes.
No, we haven't gone into non-public yet.
But when you come out of non-public, you're going to have to seal the minutes.
So we have to
So
vote, sorry, yeah.
If
we
you
have to-
adjourn, you're going to have to have another meeting.
Yeah, sorry. We have to vote to go into non-public now.
Okay, so she's probably right. Yep. Okay.
So do we want to table that last one?
Withdraw the motion.
Yeah. So looking for a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91A32A.
So moved.
I will second.
Okay. So Ms. Bishop votes yes. Ms. Gilio,
Yes.
Ms. Oden,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino,
Yes.
Ms. Ziem,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons.
I just have one question. 92 RSA 91A3 what? You didn't.
A32A.
Okay, yes.
Okay. Okay, motion passes. We're in non-public now.